Hello friends, welcome to CEC live lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to talk on information security. We are going to definitely tackle with the attacks from the attacks point of view. We are going to discuss on the information security. In our previous session we discussed information security from the point of view of threats, and we believe that through previous session you have discussed as well as discovered a lot. Friends, for this discussion on information security, where we are going to talk on attacks, we have with us in our studios Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj is Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science, Jesus and Mary College, University of Delhi. Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj is a dynamic professor who believes in giving her most of the knowledge to the students. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj on today's topic, then do call us through our toll-free number. Our toll-free number is 1800110430. I repeat, our number is 1800110430. Now, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj, and request her to explain today's topic in detail. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to the lecture.
Today, we will be continuing our discussion on the subject of information security. And today, we are going to talk about attacks on the information system. As in the previous discussions, we have seen that security basically means preventing any damage to happen to our information system. When I use the word system, I mean it is composed of a number of components. The components are hardware, software, computer networks, and of course the people. So all these assets or all these aspects of the information system, they are vulnerable to different kinds of attacks. Different kinds of attacks may mean attacks on the software, attacks on the hardware, how networks can be attacked, and how even the people who are associated with the information system, they are vulnerable to different kinds of attacks. Last lecture we were discussing about the threats to the networks, to the softwares. This lecture we will be focusing more on the threats and the attacks on the network. The tools which are used by the hackers or by the criminals in order to gather information from computer networks, and then they use that information for their personal gain or for various other purposes. That also we had discussed the various why do people become prone to cybercrime or all kinds of malicious activity related to information systems. Now, important thing here is to mention or is to keep a track on why is this kind of trend going on, where we find that the attacks have become so common or the vulnerabilities are being exploited so commonly by people. Now, there are various reasons for this kind of scenario, which means that why are these affecting the security of information systems? Now, there are a number of factors which can be attributed to this. First may be that we are using the networks a lot. The networks are very vulnerable. Then maybe people who are using the networks and the information systems, they have limited knowledge. Then also the overall design of the systems is not kept in mind, keeping the security aspect. We leave many open ends which can be easily tapped by the hackers and the other criminal minded people, and they can be then used to harm the systems or to sabotage the various assets of the information system. Then there are some other factors like the legitimacy, or there are factors like the legal system which does not prevent or which does not deter people from plunging into this kind of activity. So, overall, as a result of all these factors, we see that there has been a massive increase in various kinds of cyber criminal activities or information crime, what we call it. So, different kinds of assets are being harmed by different kinds of people. So, today we are basically going to talk about the various types of attacks that may take place. So, In the attack, basically what is an attack? An attack is an action that exploits the vulnerability in a controlled system. So accomplished by threat agent that damages or steals an organization's information. So there are various types of attacks that we have discussed and we will be discussing today, like malicious code, which includes viruses, worms, trojans, hoaxes, which means transmission of a virus hoax with a real virus attached, or this is the most devious form of attack. Then other kinds of security attacks that we will be discussing are network attacks, or network attacks we will be discussing about three main types of attacks. One is sniffing, the other is phishing or fraud, we will be talking about spoofing, and we will talk about denial of service attacks. So besides this, there are any password cracking, operating system application vulnerability attacks, server and access point impersonation, clickjacking, social engineering, and other types of attacks. Then there are backdoors, brute force, and dictionary attacks also. So the first type of attack that we are going to talk about is a software attack, that is a backdoor or a trapdoor. So a backdoor basically means that it is a secret entry point into a program, which allows those who know the access bypassing usual security procedures. It have been commonly used by developers. A threat, when left in production programs, allows to be exploited by attackers. It is very hard to block in the operating system and requires good software development and update knowledge. So basically a backdoor is a weak point which is left by the programmers, which allows people or which allows some other system or software to enter into the system and devastate the system. Then the next type of software attack is a logic bomb. This is one of the oldest types of malicious softwares, where the code is embedded in a legitimate program and it is activated only when a specified condition is met. That is, a logic bomb will not do any harm unless the particular date is arrived, or the particular disk capacity is reached, or there is a particular kind of output which the program generates. Only when this condition is met, the logic bomb will explode in the sense that it will cause all the havoc that it has been designed to create. An example could be, for instance, an employee who has a vicious mind wants to leave the company, and before he leaves the company he wants to do a lot of damage to the company. So he knows that I will be leaving on the 1st of July. So he will plant a logic bomb in the software system so that this bomb will explode only on July 1st or maybe on July 2nd. So once that employee has left the organization, he will try and devastate the entire information system by exploding this kind of a logic bomb. So only when that specified date will come, that bomb will explode, or that kind of damage will be done. Before that, it will not be done. This kind of logic bombs are very difficult to trace. Even if they are lying there in a dormant state in the software systems, they cannot be traced unless they have done the damage. Then the another type of software is a Trojan horse. Basically, a Trojan horse is a program with hidden side effects. That is, it is designed to be very attractive, and like it will be a game or it will show itself as a software upgrade. But when it runs, it performs some additional tasks. That is, it allows the attacker to indirectly gain access. They do not have any direct access. So it is often used to propagate a virus, a worm, or install a backdoor. It is simply used to destroy the data. So Trojan horse itself is actually all the sites where we see very attractive advertisements where we see that free downloads are available or free games are available on the internet. So actually they could be a possible Trojan horse, and once you download that software which appears to be a friendly and a useful software, it is actually not that what it is appearing to be, and it is going to harm your system once it has been downloaded in your computer system. So this kind of softwares, they will install viruses, or they will install some worms or even some backdoors in the software. Then we have other type of softwares like mobile codes. Mobile code is another program or script, or it may be a macro which runs automatically, and these run unchanged. So they run on heterogeneous platforms and on heterogeneous collection of windows, etc. They are transmitted from remote system to local system, and then they execute on the local system. So they often inject viruses, worms or Trojan horses and perform own exploits. So these are unauthorized data access or compromise. Then there are multi-threat malware which operate in multiple ways, like which are multipartite, that is a virus which infects in multiple ways. It will infect all the different types of files, so that it becomes even more difficult to trace the root cause of the virus, or to trace what is behind that kind of damage which is being done to the file system. Then you have the blended attack which uses multiple methods of infection. So it may be like it is using one virus and a Trojan horse together which are doing the harm. So these may include multiple types of malware. So instead of just one, it is actually a combination of different kinds of malicious softwares which attack. So these kinds of attacks are very dangerous, and these may prove to be very harmful for the computer system, because they are very difficult to be traced quickly by any one source. So they need multiple types of scans to be done to understand what is the software that is causing this kind of a damage to your system. Then of course we have the most common and the most popular kind of a malicious software which we all have heard a lot, that is the computer virus. Now computer virus is a malicious program or a software which needs some other software or some medium to be transmitted from one computer to the other, and once it has reached the other computer, once it has reached the host computer, then it will be executed there, and it will create multiple copies of itself, and these copies then execute, and there could be different types of viruses which exhibit different kinds of behavior. Some viruses are harmful viruses which may damage the files, which may delete the important files, which may corrupt the hard disk. Some may not be so dangerous, and some may not be so exploitative, and they may be a simple virus which just keeps multiplying and occupying the disk space of the computer. Nevertheless, all kinds of viruses, they are unwanted and they are unwarranted, and these all need to be scanned and removed. So these viruses, they have different stages in their life, like it has dormant stage, propagation stage, then it is triggering stage, and it is execution stage. So basically it executes within a host program. Then the next type of malicious software is worms, which replicate program that propagates over the internet, and it has phases like the same phases as the virus has: dormant, propagation, triggering and execution, and worms also disguise themselves as a system process. Then we have the zombies or the drones. These are programs which secretly attack another internet attached computer, which launch attacks that are difficult to trace to the bot's creator, and a collection of bots is called as a botnet. So a zombie, or these are programs which actually bombard the other computer with so many messages that the other computer on the network or the destination computer, it finds it difficult to execute, or it finds it difficult to carry on with giving its services. So now, after discussing these some preliminary attacks or software attacks, now we come to the second phase, that is the network attacks. Now computer network is basically a very vulnerable point, and it is prone to a large number of and a variety of threats which are prevalent inside the information systems. Now, computer networks, they are basically a collection of computers which are interconnected to each other for the purpose of information exchange. Now, we must understand that computer networks, like a local area network, which may be sometimes designed in a way that it is a very insecure environment which uses or which does not use any kind of security precautions or security prerogative which must be used for exchange of data. And even inside a local area network, if it is the local area network of an organization, it may sometimes be susceptible to any kind of external element who could come in and easily steal the data or important information through the network, because the network is an open network which does not allow much kind of authentication or authorization. So, in case of network attacks, we are going to talk about three types of attacks, that is sniffing, spoofing and hijacking, then denial of service, distributed denial of service, and we are also going to talk about DNS attacks if time permits. So, the first type of attack that we will be discussing is sniffing. Now, the word sniffing refers to smelling actually, but in this case sniffing is not a simple act of smelling, but it is in a way it is an act of intercepting messages from which are being transmitted on a network, on a local area or on an internet. So, a hacker may be prone or may use different kinds of tools to sniff or to intercept messages which are being transmitted over a network. Now, this act of sniffing or hacking or kind of reading the messages may be done through various activities or through various phases. So, this diagram here shows how a sniffer acts. Now, in this case we can see that there is a sender who is logging into a system with a login ID and a password, and this login information is supposed to reach some other computer, but en route when it is still on the network, this information is being gathered by a sniffer or a hacker. So, this sniffer or hacker is actually reading the message which is destined to reach some other computer. Now, what are the major problems with sniffing? That is, any mischievous machine can examine any packet on a broadcast medium. Now, Ethernet is a broadcast medium where at least on the segments over which it travels. So, getting passwords is the first step in exploiting a machine, because email is used which is plain text and it is vulnerable. So, basically what happens is that in a local area networks, the Ethernet card which is an unswitched network, it basically uses the technique of broadcast. That is, the same message is sent to all the computers on the network, and the one which is the destined user or one which is the destination accepts the message, all the other computers will discard the message. Now, in this case, if because it is so simple to attach any computer onto the network, for example, if you get your laptop and you can easily connect it to the network of a organization. Now, when a host is sending messages, then it is broadcasting those messages on the Ethernet, and all those messages are received by all other computers on the host. Now, since email messages and also sometimes passwords, they are transmitted on local networks in a plain text form, that is, they are not encrypted. Email messages are anyways not encrypted. So, these messages are then sniffed or they are read by the sniffer or the hacker. Now, this hacker could easily then take information from this kind of data exchange which is taking place on the network, and this information may later on be used by this sniffer for various purposes. Now, the information which is used by the sniffer could be simple emails, These could be some confidential official emails which are not supposed to be shared with anyone else, or these could be some financial transaction data which is being financial information of relevance for the company or for the individual. Passwords may also be stealed. Now this happens because there are a large number of protocols which utilize unencrypted form of text or data, or we say that is plain text. Like we have different protocols like the FTP, SNMP, SMTP, POP protocol. All these protocols, they transmit the data in the plain text form. So this data can easily be sniffed over the network, and then this data can be read, and then this data can be misused by the hacker for his or her personal gain. So basically passwords are sniffed, emails are sniffed, financial account informations are sniffed, confidential information is sniffed, low level protocol information like hardware addresses, IP addresses, routing table, etc. All this information can easily be sniffed from the networks. Now this diagram here shows a packet sniffer. So a packet sniffer is basically a software application that uses a network adapter card in a promiscuous mode to capture all network packets. So the following are the packet sniffer features. The packet sniffers exploit information passed in clear text. Protocols that pass information in the clear text, which include Telnet, FTP, SNMP and POP. Packet sniffers must be in the same collision domain. So in the diagram it is clearly seen that when a host A sends an information to another host B on the network, there is a packet sniffer which is a specific program or an application which sniffs those packets, because the information being transmitted among those protocols is using a clear text. So basically this kind of information can easily be sniffed over the network. Now it is very important hence that there are methods or there are measures taken to mitigate this kind of sniffing activity to take place on the network. Now what are the major events or what are the major activities that a network administrator or a system administrator should undertake in order to prevent the act of sniffing on his or her network and to make the network more secure? Is first is authentication. Any user who attaches or who adds his computer to the network should be authenticated. Authentication can be done through various techniques such as one-time passwords, or various kinds of defense mechanisms can be used against sniffers. Then switched infrastructure should be used. That is, if a switch is used to counter the use of packet sniffers in the environment, then anti-sniffer tools must be used. These are the tools which employ software and hardware designed to detect the use of sniffers on the networks. And cryptography, that is the most effective method for countering packet sniffers, does not prevent or detect packet sniffers, but rather it renders them irrelevant. Because in case of cryptography, what is happening is that the text or the message which is being transmitted on the network is not going through as a plain text, but it is encrypted using an encryption algorithm, maybe a simple encryption algorithm like a Caesar cipher or any other kind of different kinds of encryption algorithms are there. So the protocols which are being used on the network, they must actually use a cryptography technique with them, so that the messages do not travel the network in the plain text form, but they travel in the cipher text form, so that these messages, even if they are sniffed by a hacker on the way they are being transmitted, they can easily be stopped, and these messages can easily, even if they are sniffed, nothing will happen because these are in encrypted form. So the hacker will not gain much, even though he has snipped some information. It will take a lot of time and effort on his part to decrypt the message and to find out the real meaning of the information that he has stolen from the network. So therefore, these techniques are very crucial when we talk about anti-sniffing or mitigating the sniffers. Now, the next type of network attack that we are going to discuss is called spoofing. Now, spoofing actually means that you are showing yourself, or you are posing as someone that you are actually not. Now, in this case, what happens is that a computer or a hacker is going to change the source IP address or the source address of the system, so as to show that when it reaches the destination will will understand that the message has come from a designated, or the message has come from a trusted source, and the message will be used. Now, different kinds of spoofing techniques are used, like the MAC level spoofing. Now, in case of MAC level spoofing, this is widely used on the Ethernet, because on the Ethernet they have a card which is called the network interface card. These cards have unique addresses at the manufacturers. These addresses are called the MAC address. The MAC means media access control address. So, many cards can be configured by the user, that is, the MAC address of this can be changed. So, the bridge has no MAC address, but sends with source address of the originator. So, faking the address has the opportunity for mischief. So, what happens is that each computer which attaches to a network uses a network interface card or a network interface controller. So, this is the interface, whether it is a wired network or it is a wireless network. A network interface card is a must that every network must have, every computer must have to attach to a network. Now, this network interface card has a unique address, which is a 16-digit unique address, which is called as a media access control address. Now, this is actually the physical address of the computer on the network. Now, this media access control or the MAC address can easily be changed by the user, not so easily, but it can be changed by certain malicious users. Now, once the address has been changed on the Ethernet, then the hacker can send messages to the destination, and the destination will receive the address from the trusted MAC address, but actually the address is a counterfeit address. Counterfeit MAC address is being used by the hacker. So, the destination will assume that the messages are coming from a trusted source, and therefore they will easily accept those messages, even though these messages are actually coming from a hacker. So, this is a simple way of how spoofing will work. We will be discussing the other types of spoofing activities after a short break. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for explaining us in detail about the attacks on information security. Friends, we will be back after a short break and would be discussing more. So be with us. Hello friends, welcome back to this session where we are discussing on attacks on information security, and for the discussion we have with us in our studios Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj. Friends, if you wish to ask questions from Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj on today's topic, then do call us through a toll-free number. Our number is 1800-110-430. Now I would like to request Dr. Pavitra Bharadwaj to continue the lecture further.
So we were discussing about the topic of spoofing. That is, in case of spoofing, the address or the source address is changed by the hacker so that it appears to the destination as a trusted source, and the security policy or the firewall or various measures that the destination has taken to prevent any kind of attack will fail, because he will assume that the messages are coming from a trusted source. So in that case we had discussed about MAC spoofing, in which the MAC address of the trusted source is actually obtained by the hacker, and he starts sending messages on the Ethernet using the counterfeit MAC address which he has obtained from the trusted source, and therefore the destination will allow the messages to be accepted as they are coming from a trusted source. Now it is important to note that this kind of spoofing or MAC spoofing is very difficult to detect, and because it is only the intelligent routers which are used, they can prevent this kind of spoofing. The intelligent routers, because they hear on specific ports, they can be programmed to hear on specific addresses on specific ports, but in that also there is a problem that machines can be interchanged. So if it is an insider who is planting this kind of an attack onto the system, then this kind of a spoofing attack can be very, very difficult and challenging for the network administrator to contain and to detect within the system. The next type of spoofing attack is the ARP spoofing. Now ARP basically stands for Address Resolution Protocol. Now it is the purpose of the Address Resolution Protocol to perform the IP and the media access control mapping. Now the IP address is a logical address which is represented in the form of quadrats of 0 to 255. So an IP address will be something like 192.168.1.1, but each IP address is a logical address of the computer on the network, and this address is mapped to a physical address, that is the MAC address of the network interface card of the computer. So this mapping of IP address to the physical address is done by a specific protocol which is known as the Address Resolution Protocol or the ARP protocol. Now spoofing can be done at the ARP level also, and this type of spoofing is known as the ARP spoofing. So in this case the IP addresses of the machines are changed, or they are generated as counterfeit IP addresses, and it works. So it broadcasts the messages, the hacker will broadcast the messages, and those will appear to the host as that it is known to it, and the host which will identify the IP address, which will see that, oh, this message is destined for me, will automatically respond, and then the hacker will obtain the IP address of this host and start sending messages onto the network using this kind of an ARP spoofing technique. So again, this ARP spoofing technique is also a difficult and challenging security attack to mitigate with for the network. So in this case, if two machines are used, so if two machines are sending the messages, so one will be real and the other will be fake. So if a computer gets two messages from the same address, then there are different strategies which different operating systems will employ. Some operating systems will employ the strategy of accepting the first message that it receives from the machine, and second message will be ignored, or if it doesn't it ignores or it overrides the earlier response. Some others will override. So original messages will be can be disconnected. The original machines are then disconnected through physical means by turning off the power or disconnecting the wire, and therefore it is determined that which is the fake machine that is sending these spoofed messages on the network. Now, the third type of spoofing that takes place on the network is IP spoofing or Internet Protocol spoofing. Now, in this case, it occurs when a hacker inside or outside a network impersonates the conversations of a trusted computer. So, there are two general techniques which are used for IP spoofing. The first is that the hacker will use an IP address within the range of trusted IP addresses of the destination, and second, a hacker will use an authorized external IP addresses that is trusted. So, the uses for IP spoofing include: first, it is usually limited to the injection of malicious data or commands into an existing stream of data, and secondly, the hacker may change the routing tables to point to the spoofed IP address, and then the hacker can receive all network packets that are addressed to the spoofed address and reply just as any trusted user can. So, this kind of a spoofing activity which impersonates the IP address of a trusted source can be very detrimental for the owners of the network or for the trusted people, because in this case the hacker can gain access to all the messages which are being exchanged among the trusted IP addresses of the network. So, basically in this case what is happening is that the hacker is either acting as is obtaining an IP address that is of the trusted source, an external source, or is taking an IP address out of the range of the trusted IP addresses. This information can be obtained by the hacker. After that, the hacker will use that IP address to send messages. So, these messages could be any kind of harmful or malicious data which is sent, or it can even try to access the routing table. So, in the second case, which is very difficult and which is very dangerous for the network, because in that case the hacker will receive all information being exchanged on the network. So, it is basically a technique which is used to gain unauthorized access into a network, and in order to do that, counterfeit measures are used by the hacker. So, the attacker sends messages to a computer by forging IP address, indicating that the message is coming from a trusted source. So, attacker puts an internal or trusted IP address as its source. The access control device sees the IP address as a trusted and lets it through. So, in this case, this is an example where the sender sends a message to check the receiver, and instead of the receiver replying, it is the spoofed computer or the hacker who replies. So, in that case, the sender will think that the communication is coming from the original or from the genuine receiver, but it is actually not coming from there, and it is coming from the spoofed computer. So, the messages will now be exchanged with the hacker and not with the original, the destined destination of the messages. Now, in this case we can see here that this is an internal network which is protected by a firewall, and these messages are all the messages which are filtered through the firewall based on the IP address of the source. So, only those IP addresses are allowed which pass through the firewall which are pertaining to a particular source. So, because the firewall detects, which sees that the source IP address of the message is one amongst the trusted ones, so it easily allows the message to pass through it and to enter the internal network of the organization. So, once this message reaches the organization's network, then it can do all sides of malicious activity like planting malicious software, secretly taking or data theft can be done, or password hacking can be done. Different types of cyber crimes can easily be achieved once the network hacker has an access through the firewall of the organization. So, why is spoofing so easily done? The reason being that the routers will only check the source address. Once they check the source address, they will allow the network, or they will allow the message to pass through them. Same is the case with firewalls. Generally, the firewalls are designed to check the source address. So, basically they only look at the routers only look at the destination address. Authentication based on source address is only done by the firewall. So, to change the source address field in the IP address field header is particularly very easy for the spoofer. There are specific programs which are available. These are freely downloadable also sometimes, which provide for such software skills and such softwares which can change the IP address of a incoming ICMP packet. So, basically there are few variations in this kind of IP spoofing attack. So, first kind of IP spoofing attack is a non-blind spoofing, and the second type of IP spoofing attack is a blind spoofing. So, in a non-blind spoofing attack, basically the target computer is selected, and in this case this attack takes place when the attacker is on the same subnet as the target that could see the sequence and acknowledgement of packets. So, this uses the spoofing to interfere with a connection that sends packets along the subnet. So, you can see in this diagram that there is a victim who receives a message, who is supposed to receive a message from the partner computer, but actually there is an impersonation by the hacker and he is sending the packets to him where the source is the partner which has been spoofed and the destination shows the victim. So, in this case the victim thinks that the packets are coming from the partner and therefore trusts them and accepts them, whereas these were coming from a spoofed computer or from a hacked computer. This is another kind of IP spoofing where we see that there is a three-way handshake where we have acknowledgement bits also exchanged, but in this case also the intruder can easily get into the network. The second type of spoofing attack is a blind spoofing. This attack may take place from outside where sequence and acknowledgement numbers are unreachable. Attackers usually send several packets to the target machine in order to sample sequence numbers, which is doable in older days. So, using the spoofing to interfere with a connection or creating one that does not send packets. So, in this case what happens is that instead of having one single target, the spoofed computer or the hacker will send a great deal of messages onto the network. So, it will be a bombardment or it will be a broadcast of messages which some computer is receiving, so that the computer will not be able to make out that which is the trusted source of the message and which is not a trusted source of the message, and therefore it will allow that all the inflowing messages to come inside the system. So, in this diagram you can see that the sender computer is actually sending randomly spoofed packets which have random source addresses, and these packets they are coming so that the real source is not find the destination, or the victim is not able to find out the real source. So, basically the victim is being flooded by a large number of spoofed packets which it is not able to detect. The third type of spoofed attack is the man in the middle attack. This is also called a connection hijacking. So, in this attack a malicious party intercepts a legitimate communication between two hosts to control the flow of communication and to eliminate or alter the information. So, here what is happening is that a computer is intercepting the packets which are moving from one computer to the other. So, instead of taking the IP address or forging the IP address, it is simply the hacker has simply implanted a computer that will read the packets while they are being transmitted on the computer network. So, in this case you can see in the diagram that there is a reflector. So, the IP spoofed packet reaches the reflector, and from the reflector the reply packet reaches to the victim. So, the victim sees a large number of reply without any request. So, therefore, all these packets are being sent through reflection, or these are also called as man in the middle attack. The fourth type of spoofing attack is a denial of service, that is, conducting the attack, attackers spoof the source addresses to make tracing and stopping the denial of service as difficult as possible. With multiple compromised hosts are participating in the attack, all sending spoofed traffic, it is very challenging to quickly block the traffic. So, IP spoofing is almost always used in denial of service attacks, in which attackers are concerned with consuming bandwidth and resources by flooding the target with as many packets as possible in a short amount of time. So, IP spoofing, basically we have seen that in case of IP spoofing, the various kinds of methodologies are used by the hacker to send counterfeit messages or to read the messages. So, IP spoofing is a method of attack which is used by network intruders to defeat network security measures such as authentication based on IP addresses. This method of attack on a remote system can be extremely difficult as it involves modifying thousands of packets at a time. So, this type of attack is most effective where trust relationship exists between the machines. For example, in case of corporate networks where we have internal systems and there is trust on each other, so that a user can log in without a username or password provided they are connected from other machine on the internal network. So, it must already be logged in, of course. Then by spoofing a connection from a trusted machine, an attacker may be able to access the target machine without authenticating. So, basically spoofing attacks can only be accomplished easily on a local network or on a Ethernet, because on a large network or on a remote computer it may be very difficult, because generally computers will only accept packets from trusted source, and it is very difficult to change the IP address, to change the source IP address of thousands of packets which are reaching any particular computer. Therefore, this becomes very difficult in case of a scenario where source IP address authentication is taking place from a remote computer. But in case of a local environment where there is a trust relationship amongst computer systems, then this can be a problem, because those computers can easily be spoofed as something else. So, therefore, IP spoofing can be a very major threat for an Ethernet based local area network. Then another type of attack that we have seen is called the Smurf attack. Now, in case of a Smurf attack, they send ICMP ping packets with spoofed IP source address to a local area network, which will be broadcast to all the hosts on the LAN. So, each host will send a reply back to the spoofed IP address, leading to a denial of service. Now, there are some misconceptions about IP spoofing, that it can be used to hide the IP address surfing while internet surfing or chatting or sending an email, but this is not true, because the source IP address causes the responses to be misdirected, meaning you cannot create a normal network connection. However, IP spoofing is an integral part of many networks that do not need to see the responses. So, therefore, we say that it is not that simple to spoof the IP packets, because in case of an internet based communication, this may be a difficult and a challenging aspect of IP spoofing. Now there is some other kind of activity also, which is called as hijacking activity. In this case, it is a combination of both spoofing and sniffing. In that case, what happens is that a hacker will sniff the password or will sniff the packets from the network and gain the IP address, gain the source IP address, and then after gaining the source IP address, it may pretend to be the trusted source and then start sending packets to the destination IP address. So that is another kind of IP of network threat, which is known as session hijacking, which is achieved by combining the activities of both network sniffing as well as network spoofing. So now the impact of network spoofing can be enormous in case of computers, because in that case the spoofing computer gets an unauthorized remote root access to the system behind a filtering router firewall. After gaining the root access, it can take over existing terminal, login connections, and intruders can get easy access into the remote hosts. So in this case, we can see this diagram shows how an IP spoofing activity is taking place and how a hacker modifies the address of the source to spoof the firewall and then gets access to wreak the havoc in the network. Now the next type of attack that we are going to discuss is the denial of service attack, or commonly called as the DOS, where the attacker sends large number of connections or information requests to a target. Now the target system cannot handle successfully along with other legitimate service requests. So this may result into a system crash or inability to perform ordinary functions. Then there is another type of denial of service attack, which is called as the distributed denial of service, or the DDoS attack, which is a very dangerous form of denial of service attack because it is coordinated stream of requests which is launched against the target from many locations simultaneously. So this is a very diverse kind of attack which takes place. In case of denial of service, actually what happens is that a large number of requests are sent to a source computer, to a destination computer from any kind of source computer. Now this source computer will send the request basically after spoofing. So it is a combination. Once the computer has been spoofed, once the IP address has been spoofed, it can be used to correct a denial of service attack. So what happens is that the computer or the host will be flooded with the requests, and once it has been flooded with those requests, it becomes impossible for it to process all those requests. So therefore what will happen, either the computer will get extremely slow or sometimes it may even come crashing down. So it will not be able to provide the services to the legitimate users of the system. So in this case you can see that it is the hacker is compromising the system and is using the systems to send enormous number of requests to a single host computer. So it can be done remotely and it is a coordinated attack. Now in case of a distributed denial of service, it is actually the hacker who is using the handlers. Now the handlers are actually using agents. These agents are also sometimes called as zombies. So these zombies, they are sending the messages to the victims. Now the victim receives, now each handler can actually send or handle or coordinate the activities of thousands of zombies. So each zombie will then send multiple requests to the victim. So therefore the victim is actually flooded with a vast, enormous enormous number of requests which it receives from these zombies, and therefore it becomes impossible for the victim to process those requests. So, as a result, what happens is that the computer becomes extremely slow, or it may become unusable. So, therefore, because of this activity, the computer may become slow, the resources may get wasted, and it may result into a denial of service. So, once a computer emerges, or it says that there is a denial of service which is taking place, then in that case what happens is that this is a threat, or the availability of the resources is being affected because of this kind of denial of service attack. Now, one of the other ways in which the networks or the information systems are attacked is through social engineering, using social skills to convince people to reveal access credentials or other valuable information to an attacker. It is a very famous words of a computer scientist, that the people are the weakest link. You can have the best technology, firewall, intrusion detection system, biometric devices, etc., but somebody can call an unsuspecting employee. So, and then because of this, what we see is that one is the social engineering. For example, people may get calls from various companies, from various credit card or bank companies. Actually, these are not the real bank employees or the real credit card companies who are calling, but these are hackers, or these are people who are trying to steal people's information or money from the systems. So, what they will do is that they will very convincingly ask people to reveal their confidential PIN, etc., and will give it to it. So, unless the people and the employees of the organization, they are well educated and they have been trained well to meet with such kinds of security threats, it will be very difficult for organizations to meet all this kind of attack and to mitigate these attacks and to come out of these successfully. So, these were a few attacks that we discussed on computer networks and a few tools which are used as information gathering tools by the hackers on computer networks. So, with this we come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for the precious inputs to the lecture. And friends, if you wish to give your feedbacks to the lecture, as well as if you wish to ask a question, then you can contact us through our mail ID. Our ID is info.cec@nic.in. The lecture is going to be uploaded on YouTube soon, so you can say the lecture the number of times you wanted, and yes, afterwards you definitely can write to us. Friends, now we are taking your leave, and we will be meeting again very soon and would be discussing more on information security. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.